Oh, good evening and welcome to the November 20th council meeting. If you'd please stand and join us in the flag salute. It's going to be led by Councilman Gary George this evening.
Please join me in saluting the greatest flag, greatest country in the world. Again.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. You may be seated. And we have one ceremonial this evening. I'd like to call up Jose Alire. Jose, if you'd please come up. No, didn't forget about you.
So
You
nice
come
to
off
see
of the
you.
pledge. Jose has retired, and he's now enjoying all of the honeydews that his wife is having him do, as well as, are you still running?
Still running.
Still running. He goes hunting. He's an actual, really a good marksman? Outdoorsman.
I can't shoot.
You,
I can't shoot.
you can't shoot?
No.
Then how do you bag those deer and stuff?
I don't. They're pretty safe.
They're pretty safe. Well, we have the coveted tile to present you this evening, and it says, the city of Chino, good heavens, I'm having trouble this evening. The Chino City Council, on behalf of the citizens of Chino, wish to express their appreciation for your 29 years of dedicated service to the city of Chino and its residents. My goodness sakes, 29 years, Jose. It's a long time. He has seen us through many, many projects. Street projects, sewer projects, water projects, you name it, and Jose has been part of it. And we're going to miss you. We're going to miss you, but I envy you in your retirement, doing the things that you love, especially with Stephanie and your kids. So would you like to say a few words this evening?
I sure would. First of all, I'm truly humbled. It's been an honor and a pleasure working for the city of Chino. I've worked for other agencies, and I tell you, the culture that the council instills on this organization and the residents as well, how they treat staff and all, it's just unmatched out there, I tell you. I'm truly blessed to have had the opportunity to work here, and it's meant a lot to me. My career here has meant a lot. I've taken a lot home with me, even into retirement. Some great relationships I've established here over the years. And it's just been quite a ride, Bumpy at times, but quite a ride. And I just want to thank, challenging, yes, you and the city council and all the past city council members that have been with us for the opportunity to serve this great community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jose, and we wish you well in your retirement.
Anytime.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is Mr. Ballantyne. Do we have any additions or revisions to the agenda?
Sorry. Yes, Mayor. I'll be introducing item number 8 on the agenda, since obviously Mr. Alire has since retired. In addition, some of the exhibits in the agenda packet for item number 8 were posted upside down, and staff, because of a fax we received, and so staff has revised that, so the agenda packet is correct as it sits. But I will be making the presentation instead of Jose.
Okay, thank you very much.
So if I may just clarify the point, the agenda does list Mr. Alire as the staff person. It's actually corrected tonight to be from your city manager.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Okay, next we have public announcements. First, I'd like everyone to note that City Hall will be closed this Thursday and Friday, November 22nd and 23rd, in observation of Thanksgiving. City Hall will reopen this upcoming Monday, November 26th at 7:30 in the morning. Also, I'd like to remind everyone that this year's annual tree lighting ceremony will be held on Wednesday, December 5th, due to scheduling conflicts. As usual, the tree lighting ceremony will begin at 6 p.m., where everyone can enjoy light refreshments, listen to the Chino Community Chorus, and join myself and the council as we flip the switch and officially welcome the holiday season here at Chino City Hall. Following the tree lighting ceremony, the City Council meeting will begin at 7 p.m. here in the council chambers. For more information on the tree lighting ceremony and the Chino City Council meeting, please call the admin department at 909-334-3304. Additionally, on Saturday, December 1st, please join the Chino Valley YMCA by participating in the 7th annual Reindeer Romp at Ayala Park, which is located at the corner of Central and Edison Avenues. Here, individuals of all ages and capabilities can reach their fitness goals by participating in the 5K, 10K, both beginning at 8:15, or for those under 8 years old, the quarter-mile kids run, which begins at 8 o'clock also. For all those interested, please make sure you register soon, as prices will increase by $5 after Monday, November 26th. For more information, please visit www.active.com and search Reindeer Romp 2018. And lastly, I'd like to give an early reminder that the annual Chino Youth Christmas Parade and Fair will start at 9 o'clock on Saturday, December 8th. The parade will start on the corner of Riverside Drive and Monte Vista Avenue. Then we'll head east on Riverside Drive and take a south turn on Central Avenue, ending at Chino Avenue. Following the parade, make sure you stop by the Civic Center to enjoy carnival rides, family entertainment, craft fairs, and Santa's Village at the Youth Museum. For more information, please call our Community Services Department at 909-334-3256. Okay, next on the agenda is public comments, and we have a written request to speak from our very own Chief Karen Comstock, who would like to provide our invocation this evening. So at this time, I'll invite all who would like to participate to stand with us.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you tonight for the many blessings you have and you continue to continue to bring to the city of Chino. As we enter this week of Thanksgiving, I just want to pray for the family members who have lost so much in Central California to the tragic fires. As you know, Lord, some have lost all, including their lives and family members. So, Lord, please help to comfort them this week, as many of us are giving thanks for the blessings that you continue to give to us. And Lord, we also pray that the work that will be conducted here this evening will continue to strengthen our city as well as please you. And we pray all this in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chief. We have one written request to speak, and that being Jessica Figueroa from Assemblyman Freddie Rodriguez's office.
Good evening. My name is Jessica. I'm here on behalf of Assemblymember Freddie Rodriguez. Thank you so much for having me tonight, Mayor Huloa and fellow council members. I just wanted to personally invite you to our upcoming holiday open house on Saturday, December 1st from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. It will be here at our district office. We have actually partnered with the Chino Valley YMCA this year as our nonprofit organization to collect much needed toy donations to families in need here in our community. So I hope you can join us. It should be a good time. So thank you
very much. Okay, we have a tradition here, and that is students that attend our meetings, which are usually required by their classes, are invited to come up, give us your name, the class that you're taking, your teacher's name, and the school that you attend. So come on up. It's your chance to put it on the record that you're here for your teacher, because you're on TV. Come on, there's a bunch of you here. Take a number. Okay, right there at the lectern, where the microphone is.
I'm Jackie Olmeda. I'm taking U.S. Government. I'm a senior at Don Lugo High School, and my teacher is Mr. Pope.
Thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Fatima Garcia. I'm a senior at Don Lugo High School. I'm taking U.S. Government, and my teacher is Mr. Pope.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Melanie Martinez. I'm a senior, and I'm taking U.S. Government, and my teacher is Mr. Pope.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Samantha Govea. I'm a senior at Don Lugo, and I'm taking U.S. Government with Mr. Pope.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Rita. I'm a senior at Don Lugo, taking U.S. Government with Mr. Pope.
And what's your last name?
Rita Vargas.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Matthew Canoel. I'm a senior at Don Lugo, and I take U.S. Government with Mr. Pope.
Okay.
I'm Fiona Chen. Take U.S. Government in Don Lugo High School, and teacher is Mr. Paul.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Lane. I'm a senior at Don Lugo, and I'm taking U.S. Government with Mr. Pope.
Looks like his whole class is here this evening.
Where's Mr. Pope?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lucas Moda. I'm a senior at Don Lugo, and I'm taking government with Mr. Pope.
Hi, I'm Justin Lagunas. I'm a senior at Don Lugo, taking government with Mr. Pope.
Hi, I'm Jared Vanderberg. I go to Don Lugo. I'm a senior, and I'm taking government with Mr. Pope.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emiliano Palmerin. I'm a senior at Don Lugo, and I'm here for Mr. Pope.
Thank you.
I'm Adrian Toppy, and I'm taking government with Mr. Pope.
Hello, I'm Giovanni Servin. I'm a senior at Don Lugo, and I'm also taking U.S. Government, Mr. Pope.
Okay, thank you. Any other students that haven't come up? Okay, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the council on any item that's not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. We will move on to the consent calendar. Do any members of the public wish to have any items on the consent calendar pulled? Or members of the council? No. No? Okay, then I would entertain a motion. Okay, it's been moved by Councilman George and seconded from Mayor Pro Tem Howie. And the item passes 4 yes, with Mr. Elrod being absent. Next item on the agenda is under public hearings. Now, prior to the vote of the council, any member of the audience will have an opportunity to address the council on this item. Item number 8 is McBride RV Storage, appeal of a development impact fee reimbursement. This item is to approve a development impact fee reimbursement in the amount of $343,232 for ultimate street improvements completed by McBride RV Storage. So first, I'd like to open the public hearing, and then I'd like to ask for our city manager, Ballantyne, to provide us with a staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. The item before you this evening is an appeal by Mr. McBride of the city engineer's determination of eligible debt reimbursement request for drainage and street improvements made in association with the appellant's RV storage project located at 7231 Kimball Avenue. The applicant is seeking reimbursement for 2 items, specifically an on-site storm detention system and also street improvements that were made along Kimball Avenue. Based on the city engineer's review, it is recommended that the appellant be reimbursed for the street improvements in the amount of $433,232. Mr. McBride is represented by Mr. Fisher. The city is being represented by Mr. Gutierrez. Both attorneys will present their arguments in favor and opposition to the reimbursements requested. This concludes my report, and staff recommends we proceed with the presentations by the appellant and staff, beginning with the appellant.
Okay, before we proceed, do any council members have any questions? Nope. Okay.
If I may, Madam Mayor,
Yes,
before you turn it over to the 2 parties, my office has communicated with both Mr. Gutierrez and Mr. Fisher on a protocol for this particular hearing. The parties have all agreed to this protocol. where Mr. Fisher, on behalf of the appellant, will begin by presenting opening arguments and presenting any evidence. That will be limited to, and this part I want to make clear before we open it up, that we've assigned, in discussing this issue with the mayor, we've assigned time limitations to each aspect. The first presentation that I just mentioned would be limited to 20 minutes. And then Mr. Gutierrez, on behalf of the city, would make opening arguments and present evidence and testimony. And that, again, will also be limited to 20 minutes. The mayor would then invite the appellant, again, through Mr. Fisher, to present a rebuttal. That will be limited to 10 minutes. Mr. Gutierrez would then come back for a rebuttal and provide a closing argument, again, limited to 10 minutes. And then finally, Mr. Fisher has the last opportunity to speak and make closing arguments, which will be limited to 3 minutes. So I wanted to, I understand this is the suggested protocol, but I wanted to announce those time limits so that both parties can understand them and provide any feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Galante.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to invite Mr. Gerald Fisher to make the opening arguments and present evidence.
Good evening, Mayor Ulloa and members of the council. First of all, I'd like to make it clear I am not from Mr. Pope's class.
Okay. It's good that the students come, though.
It is. It is. It's a wonderful experience. I need to make clear that I filed with the city attorney 2 objections, one to the protocol as being violative of due process of law, and later another due process objection to the entire process. Those are available from your city attorney. I'm sure he, at some point, will provide them to you, but I think it's important that the council see them and ask that the council make a point of reading them.
They're, just for the record, they're included in the record as an attachment.
Thank you. I was handed Mr. Gutierrez's recommendation for approval of the staff report and the request in the staff report. The staff report that I was given did not reflect that the 343 was to be in the form of a reimbursement agreement for payment at some point in time. However, I do see that tonight. We are here because Judge Ochoa ordered us to be here. He ordered us to be here because the case that is at the heart of why we're here has been pending for 8 years. And at the conclusion of his remarks, when Judge Ochoa was, to put it in simple terms, castigating the city and Mr. Alire, he made it clear that he believed there had been a violation of due process of law, which is at the heart of our legal system, by the city, and specifically pointing to Mr. Alire, because calculations were done in 2011 by city engineer Jim Hill for reimbursement, and those have been completely ignored by staff in the recommendation, at least the one I saw, by Mr. Alire. Now, I feel very badly that on the occasion of an award to Mr. Alire for all his 29 years of dedicated service, that I have to focus on Mr. Alire's work in this matter, which Judge Ochoa recognized as having been violative of due process. The reason we are here tonight, and the reason Judge Ochoa sent us here, was to exhaust administrative remedies that should have been given to the McBrides 8 years ago. And yet the recommendation to council, to the city council, is that they approve something created in January of this year, in complete disregard of the work of the city engineer who was on the ground and a centerpiece of the process of development of McBride's RV storage facility. So I'm a little stunned at what I see tonight. Now, I know I'm new to this case. I came in just before January, and I've been through 9 volumes of documents, trial testimony, deposition testimony, a little bit of which you'll see tonight. And so when I see that the council is asked to make a decision by a new city engineer dated January 2018, I'm stunned. And I think what Judge Ochoa is saying to this council is take this opportunity to correct this mess. And correcting it is not relying on something created this year, but on the process through which the McBrides have been put by the city, longtime residents of the city, in the course of developing something that the city asked them to do, and at great expense. Since my time is limited, I'm not just going to go through this PowerPoint, but I'm going to ask you to read it very carefully. Let me tell you about the flaw in the report, which is mirrored by the staff report that you've been asked to endorse. It's patently wrong. It doesn't include, I'm sure the council is familiar with Parkrest. It doesn't include the $373,000 that the city assumed as an obligation when, in accordance with the conditions, Parkrest did not pay McBrides for the work they did. The city assumed that obligation. The city requested and received a signed reimbursement form, and over 8 years, McBrides have not been paid for that. That isn't even in the report before the council. Secondly, the $343,000 number is $45,000 more than city engineer James Hill said should be reimbursed to the McBrides. James Hill's calculations and his letter to the McBride's attorney is in the materials in front of you. Another reason I'm asking you to look at it very carefully. When the conditions set forth in the materials in front of you that were issued to the McBrides in 2005 are examined, what you will see in those conditions, and let me list them for you. 1.12D, Parkrest. 1.12A through C, the street improvements, which is what the 343,000 is about. And 1.17E regarding the storm drain. Now, the position the city has taken, well, first of all, I have no idea why after 8 years, the city hasn't paid McBride's a dime for the debt of Parkrest it assumed. That happened because somebody was asleep at the switch and didn't provide Parkrest with a reciprocal obligation to pay McBride's for the work. The $373,000 number was the product of a very careful analysis of documents that Jim Hill requested, audited, tested, and resolved. The city assumed the obligation of Parkrest CVC 8 years ago in this chamber. It was not a DIF project. And I'm going to ask Mr. McBride to explain how it was that that came about, because the essence of this is that the city is trying, well, the city through its representatives are changing the rules after the game is over and everyone has left the stadium, which is why Judge Ochoa said there has been a violation of fundamental due process.
So back in 2005, when we were developing this, I was working with staff members through the Development Review Committee, and they came up with conditions of approval that I had to do in order to build my storage facility. It was required. And they put them in writing, and they were made promises that these things would get done. One of the ones was the condition that I would make these improvements. Do you guys have a handheld microphone?
Is there a handheld mic?
Thank you. So I was asked to make these improvements along Kimball Avenue right here. Can you guys see that? And along, this wasn't my property. This is the Parkrest development, also known as the Arco gas station on the corner. And the city required me to redo all this paving through here to, on the street improvements because of issues that they had of water flowing across here. And in doing so, they promised in this condition here that they would collect we didn't know the number at the time, they would collect the amount of money that I would do, that would cost me to do this. And they would put it on a condition of approval that, because they were following us 6 to 8 months right behind us. And the city staff forgot to put that in there. And so that created a problem. When the city staff tried to add it on later when they got a time extension, it caused a lawsuit between the two. And I'm sure if Earl was here, he probably remember, maybe some of you probably remember all that went on. And basically, the city settled with them for the $373,000 that the city said they would take over and they'd pay me. But I never got paid. Jose there wouldn't process it. He wouldn't take it to city council. The next condition, number 2, which was the street improvements that were along right here and also went past here all the way towards the fire department, that was on there with the exemption of the amount that they were going to deduct for the 12 feet, the curb, the gutter, and this in here. I worked with Mr. Hill, and in order to get these things approved, I had to produce the actual receipts and the copies of the canceled checks to show that what I actually paid. And this was already done, and the number was just under $300,000. But Mr. Placentia, somehow, he says he reviewed the documents, but he only put 2 of the conditions on. He didn't put all 3. I was asked to do 3 different packages because they wanted a separate number to make sure that got on this condition so I get reimbursed. They wanted this one here so that I get reimbursed from the city or get a DFI credit. And the third was underneath the storage facility across the entire thing here is a great big huge underwater detention system that they wanted me to build to help fix this problem. Now the problem was in 2005, this was the only road going back to the Lewis Home Project. The big gigantic clubhouse, that's where they were selling the homes. This street right back here, which is Bickmore, it was tore up. There was no way to get to it. Pine Avenue was under construction. So there was an immediate need, and the city was begging me, could you please fix this? Because every time it rained, it'd flood across here, and the street would close, and nobody could sell houses. And that was really important because this was the infancy of the whole preserve project. So I built it. We built it, we put it in, and in the report that Mr. Placentia, he says it's no longer eligible, which it was. The city knew, the city engineer knew that this was not part of the original plan, the drainage plan, but he showed me in the code section where there's and I put it in my report there that I did, that the city engineer has the right to make changes to it. And they said, look, if you do this, we got your back. Because anytime you do something with the storm drain, why, that's a priority reimbursement. You get it settled within 90 days. And so here I was thinking I was doing this big favor for the city, and it turns out they didn't have my back because they wouldn't process it. Mr. Alire refused to process it. He refused to bring it up to the city council. And I'll tell you why a little later on. And then, as you can see right here, in his report, he says, well, it's no longer eligible because no water flows across. It doesn't collect any water. Well, I tell you, when Jim Hill did this, which was 4 years after it was already completed, not only did he have the study, but he actually had the evidence of knowing, because he could go out there and see the water flowing onto our property. What I'd like to do is point out, you notice there's 2 different color of driveways? This one's dark, this one's white. Because all the water is directed through here and it washes, and the downhill goes this way. And you see these white streaks? Those are all water stains that go to the back down here where it collects. Mr. Hill authorized it and said I should be reimbursed, and the reason why he did that, and the reason why I should get credit or reimbursement, was by the fact that it was known by the city that it was collecting water. They asked me, they put 2 different conditions in there to make sure that got done. They were in such a need and hurry, they didn't even know the size they wanted, but they said, do this study so we know how much water we need you to collect for the city. And I find it disingenuous because Mr. Alire was part of the DCR committee. He was at that time in charge of traffic, and he was over here telling me, we got to reshape these streets so that this water flows in here and so that you can collect it. And yet he wants to tell you today through this report that McBride's, no, it don't do that. It don't actually do what you said it does. I find that very disingenuous that he does that today, and he did that. So those were the 3 things that were supposed to be reimbursed to me, and I just find it very incredible that the city does not have my back, as they promised they did back in 2005. I made the improvements. The city and the people in the preserve drive on this road that I put in And all of this cost $1.7 million, and I've never got a penny of it back. Not a penny.
Annie? With regard to the conditions, 1.17E, permanent on-site detention retention system, accepting off-site flows are eligible for credits against the storm water reimbursement impact as determined by the city engineer. That was Jim Hill. That wasn't Mr. Placencia 8 years later. Now, the position of the city's attorneys is that they're not eligible because the water, because it wasn't on a map prior to the time McBrides were asked to build this. Well, the city engineer had the power to change that, and he did. Now, I only have a minute, but there's an essential part of this, and that is a bankruptcy and a discharge order, which prohibits, in all respects, what the city, through Mr. Alire, directing the city's lawyers to do, is attempting in the courts. I know what McBrides have had to spend for lawyers. The city's had to spend the same thing. And when I come back, I'm going to talk about that bankruptcy, because the city's lawyers have concealed that from the trial judge. When I take this back into court, it's going to be revealed. And this is the one opportunity the city's going to have not to be wrapped up in this as it moves forward in court. I don't understand the report of Mr. Placencia at all. And since it is mirrored by the staff report initially issued by Mr. Alire, I'm going to ask the council to start looking at this much more intensely, much more deeply. Since I can't continue, I didn't know about the 20 minutes until tonight. I did not agree to that. So I had to basically abandon what I was going to give you, except in the form of the paper in front of you. We'll talk about the third piece of this, the bankruptcy, in my rebuttal.
Okay. Next, I'd like to invite Jimmy Gutierrez to make an opening argument and present evidence.
Good evening, members of the council and members of the public. Since we have 20 minutes, I'm not going to go in great detail at this point, except I'm going to say that the purpose of being here is based on the court's order to the city to calculate certain reimbursements that may or may not be available, give those to the McBrides, and the McBrides can object and appeal. That's why we're here. The whole question of any entitlement to money that the McBrides have from the city is predicated on the conditions of approval in Chapter 3.45 of the Chino Municipal Code, which is a preserved DIF program. This whole talk about promises has nothing to do with this. And I've cited the order in the letter I gave you. I've made it one of the exhibits, as well as the letter that the city engineer, Jesus Placencia, sent to the McBrides pertaining to what he's determined they are entitled to and not. what I'm going to do at this point in time, I want to introduce Scott Thorpe, who is a gentleman that prepared the Master Facilities Program and the Nexus study upon which Chapter 3.45 of the Chino Municipal Code is based. And I want him to explain what the Preserved EIF program is, what facilities are contained in that, and what facilities are available for reimbursement and what facilities are not, and the reason for that. So, Mr. Thorpe, you got 4 minutes.
I had 5 a minute ago. Anyway, my name is Scott Thorpe. I'm with Revenue and Cost Specialists. I've been doing the city's impact fees since 1989, the same year that AB 1600 was passed. I've been doing this now for 30 years. I've had over 75 client cities and a number of special districts also. RCS, through my design, is the only impact fee company that does a master facilities plan. And I can't imagine what a mess it would be if you didn't have at least that. But anyway, very quickly, for the audience, I'm going to give them a 30-second explanation of impact fees. The preserve is going to be built. There's very little there now. So you need to have huge amounts of infrastructure to build that out. You need streets, the big four. You need streets, storm drainage, water, and sewer at the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars. So in each case, there's a master plan, which is a great document. It's done by engineers. They take a look at what's probably going to be built within the broader purpose zones, that this is going to be single-family homes, this is going to be attached dwellings, this is going to be commercial retail service, and then we're going to have some manufacturing over here in various amounts of acres. Then a master plan is made by engineers. They go, well, we can count on this kind of water demand here and that much water demand there, and they design a system within the public right-of-way. And these are the projects that are identified, and then we move on to the master facilities plan are the spine infrastructure, the big lines going down the middle of the street, the arterials, the collectors. What's not included, obviously, are improvements on private property. Because one, if we included them, the impact fee would be through the roof and nobody build anything. Two, we have no idea what's going to be built there. We know it's going to be commercial retail service, but that leaves a myriad of possibilities. You can have, as in this case, an RV storage location, or you could have a nursery. Obviously, each one's going to have different demands on the infrastructure, but they're still within the same land use. So we have these projects that are listed there. So we only list, again, the spine infrastructure, like in attractive homes. We don't include the sidewalks or the street within the tract of homes, because that's built on private land and you have to accept it later. This is even an exception in that it won't be a public project ever. You won't accept it. It'll never become part of the city's system. So we're talking about the spine infrastructure here, and that's what makes it into the report. Now, the impact fee report takes this total amount of projects for storm drainage and divides it by the cumulative demand by all those land uses that I talked about earlier, and we come up with an average likely amount of water coming off of it, and the costs are distributed that way. So we have a cost, a full cost, and that's what the city's going to collect. If you collected impact fees from everybody, you'd collect that money and you'd build it. But in reality, the city builds very little of it. It's usually built piecemeal by whatever developer that's there, and they build what's contiguous to them, or they may have to, and they contribute something to a larger amount, like in this case, say a city-owned detention basin that you're going to have plenty of that are like 20 acres that hold lots of runoff. I'm hurrying, Jimmy, I'm hurrying. And anyway, so if you start giving reimbursements for projects that are not on the list, you will run out of money and the system will not get completed. It'd be the same thing if you started giving credits for sidewalks in tracts of homes. You can't do that. These are a couple of the things that would put your system at risk.
if you didn't increase the price of the projects over the years and you lost your purchasing power. Okay, what do we include? We include the construction cost. We include the overhead, which is the engineering, the inspections, the materials testing, on and on and on. We include the cost of land, if there's any. We include also a contingency amount. But nowhere in there is interest either, by the way, because the city doesn't have any projects where money was borrowed to build them. So there is no interest.
So let me ask you this question. Did you prepare the master facilities plan for the city of Chino that I'm showing you to your left as Exhibit 16 to the city's document?
Yes, I worked with the city engineering staff and we looked through the master plan and we put projects into the master facilities plan that were spine related.
Okay, now, my question is this, as far as the on-site detention basin that the McBrides constructed on their facility, is that a improvement that is contained within this report?
No, it's not, because it's on privately held land and we don't ever include those.
Thank you. Thank you. I now would like to call David Gilbertson as my next witness. Thanks, it was good. David Gilbertson was a city engineer for a few years here in Chino, and he did the underlying calculations that showed up in Jesus Placencia's letter to the McBrides about what they were entitled to reimbursement for street improvements. I'm going to ask Mr. Gilbertson to explain what documents he reviewed and how he came up with those numbers. Would you do that, Mr. Gilbertson?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As Jimmy said, I'm a licensed civil engineer in the state of California. I've been practicing consulting city engineering services for over 30 years in Southern California region. I became the city engineer for contract city engineer for Chino in July of 2013. And I'm no longer the contract engineer as my contract expired in June of this year. Back in 2013, when I first started, my first order of business was as contracts engineer, I was directed by Jose Alire to analyze and make a determination on the development impact fee reimbursement for the McBride development. This was completely independent from Jim Hill's analysis that was done previous to that. I'll try to explain my methodologies for my determination right now. McBride constructed street improvements on Kimball Avenue that were required by site approval 2005-02 and SCUP 2005-02.
Excuse me, for the record, there's something on the screen. Would you explain what that is?
Yeah, that is a diagram that I used to break out the various costs that were provided by McBride, and I'll get to that a little bit later in my
Mr.
report.
City Attorney, can we designate that as City Exhibit number 5?
Certainly.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So the street improvements were extending from Euclid Avenue to approximately 500 feet easterly of the McBride development. That's the end of the orange you see on that exhibit. The reason they had to be extended that far is McBride built the ultimate street improvements on the south side of Kimball Avenue, and we had to extend it to 500 additional feet in order to join back to the existing narrow two-lane road that was Kimball Avenue further east. McBride submitted to the city detailed cost breakdown for all of the related construction costs, including initial construction bid, contract change orders, as well as surveying and city permitting costs. These costs were all verified by contractor and consultant invoices and detailed cost breakdowns. I did not exclude any construction costs submitted by McBride in my analysis. Based on my review of the documents provided McBride and the Chino Municipal Code, the project conditions of approval, as well as the as-built street improvement plans, I determined the total cost for the street construction to be $488,894. Once the total cost of the street construction was determined, I then focused my attention on two areas. The portion of the street improvements in front of Parcel 1 of Lot Line Adjustment 2004-09, designated as Area 1, and that's the westerly part closer to Euclid Avenue, and the portion of the improvements east of Parcel 1, which I designated as Area 2, That includes McBride and the previously mentioned easterly extension improvements. As I previously mentioned, the Parcel 1 development, or the Area 1, is known as the Park Crest property. I use the areas of actual improvements as a basis of my determination for the percentages for each of these areas. And the percentage is roughly equated to about 40% for Area 1, the Park Crest development, or $184,234 of the total cost, and 60% of the total cost for Area 2, which is $304,660. After that was determined, I then further broke down the analysis into street improvements for each area, for Area 1 and Area 2, that are reimbursable costs based on Chino Municipal Code 3.45, and the street improvements within each area that are not reimbursable costs. And this is based on the project conditions of approval, specifically condition of approval 1.12A, and Chino Municipal Code sections 12.08.020 and 12.08030. I prepared the colored exhibit as you see before you, kind of showing the improvements broken out. The blue and pink areas shown on there are non-reimbursable frontage improvements. In the orange, yellow, and green areas are the reimbursable street improvements. For this analysis, I again use square footage of asphalt placed for my determination of the percentages for the cost breakdown. Based on that, I determined the combined reimbursable costs for orange, yellow, and green for both areas totaled $343,232, which matches the staff report. This, as I've already stated, this cost is reimbursable from the preserve diff program stipulated in Chino Municipal Code section 3.45.110C. And I also determined that the combined frontage improvements, the pink and blue, along Kimball Avenue totaled $145,661 and are required to be constructed by every property owner or developer in the city under Chino Municipal Code section 12.08 and thus are not reimbursable. That includes my part.
Mr. Gilbertson, I have one question.
Okay.
In calculating the amount of reimbursement for street improvements, you said you deducted out the cost of the frontage improvement or the pink and blue areas, correct?
Correct.
Did you deduct out what the development impact fees should have been had they been paid by the McBrides?
No, I did not.
Thank you. For my next witness, I would like to call Jose Alire. Only have 8 minutes. Mr. Alire is no stranger to you. He was a Director of Public Works here, and he oversaw most of this, the issue of the reimbursement. I'd like him to testify as far as what the project conditions were, what the street improvements were and what's reimbursable, what the retention basin was and was not, and why it's not reimbursable. Would you proceed, Mr. Alire?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council and Jimmy Gutierrez. As been stated before, you know, in June, on June 6, 2005, the McBrides were entitled and conditionally approved, and those conditions are in your packet. McBrides accepted these conditions without contesting these conditions at all. McBrides then proceeded, once they were approved, and pulled building permits and developed phase 1 of their site. Now we all know McBride is seeking preserve diff reimbursements for the street improvements on Kimball and the on-site detention system. So on January 17th of 2018, this when the latest city engineer, Jesus Plasencia, issued his letter, which had taken into account all the previous work that had been done by Jim Hill and, excuse me, Mr. Dave Gilbertson, the contract city engineer. But he first addresses the on-site storm drain system or detention system. And it was quoted earlier, condition 1.17C, off-site drainage flow shall not negatively impact adjacent properties. That was a requirement on there. Based on that requirement, the McBrides accepted that condition, submitted a hydrology report, a design, and completed the construction of the on-site detention system in order to comply with that. In the response letter, The city engineer at that time, Jesus Plasencia, stated that only DIF reimbursement can be given for construction of a public facility. And that is the facilities that are described in the DIF reports as referenced in Chino Municipal Code 3.45.110. The city engineer concluded that the project did not construct any DIF-eligible storm drain facilities, and that is because it was not listed on the master plan of facilities. We're not collecting fees for it, and we should not be paying for these if we're not collecting fees for them. The hydrology report also is clear that the facility, and this is the hydrology report prepared by McBride's engineer, and it clearly states that the facility is not taking water from the street. So if you looked at that diagram that was in front of you, one of the opening statements in there is that we're not taking runoff from the properties to the north. The city's drainage systems are to go down Euclid Avenue and another one further to the east that will convey the water south. And that's how, and those drainage systems are in the DIF program. So therefore, the city engineer concluded it was not eligible for DIF reimbursement from the storm drain DIF program. Next, he moved on to the Kimball Avenue street improvements, and as you saw the diagram, can we bring that diagram up real quick? I just wanted to point something out on that. The ultimate improvements along the project frontage, as Dave Gilbertson testified earlier, are not reimbursable. But the portions that are, and this is why the numbers are different, it's the 343 now, are the other parts that are north of that, that are the regional part of the network, that are in the DIF program, that we are collecting fees for, and we can and should reimburse them for those because they are DIF facilities. The city would have needed to build those anyway. So the total reimbursement for that is the number that's in your council report, $343,232, which Dave Gilbertson validated, and I won't go over those as well. So that concludes my comments. If you have anything else for me.
I have a question. For the record, the hydrology report that Mr. Alire alluded to is listed and contained as City Exhibit number 20, and it contains an executive summary. I want Mr. Alire to read from that. First of all, do you recognize that as being the executive summary of the hydrology report?
Yes.
Would you read what that language is in that first paragraph?
Sure. Off-site runoff north of Kimball Avenue will be diverted easterly away from the project site and discharged into the proposed detention basin located on the northeasterly direction of the project site. This basin is being studied and designed by Associated Engineers. In the ultimate condition, there will be no off-site flows contributed to the project site.
Okay. So does this mean that water that is not on the McBride property ends up on the McBride property or goes somewhere else?
It is designed to go somewhere
else. Where else does it go?
Into the storm drain systems that I alluded to earlier along, Euclid Avenue, and then to the east, there's another one.
Was the finding in this report prepared by the McBride hydrologist the basis of not providing for reimbursement under that one condition of approval 1.17?
I believe it would have been by a city engineer.
I had a question for him, but I don't remember what it is, so I will release him, and I think I have 1 minute?
No.
As I calculate, I'm up. Okay, perfect timing then, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to re-invite up Mr. Fisher for a 10-minute rebuttal.
The question that ought to be asked is, if it wasn't eligible, why did you ask? Why was McBride's conditioned to build it? Doesn't make a lot of sense to make somebody spend $1 million on something that the city didn't need.
I'm making notes. Go ahead.
I want to read from that hydrology report as well. Because if you look at the existing conditions, and if you would be kind enough to activate the screen for me. Under existing conditions at the time in the hydrology report. It was nice to have Mr. Alire read it, but he didn't read this part. Topography illustrates that off-site runoff originates from tributary areas south of Riverside Drive through portions of the Chino Airport to Kimball Avenue. Existing level use consists of airport-related and agricultural areas. Runoff contributing from north of the project site flows from Kimball Avenue and into the site in the form of sheet flows. And again, if you look at this diagram,
Mr. Fisher, would you please get the microphone? Or here, Mr. McBride has
Could you
it.
show them that section again, please?
I'd like you to see the actual stains from the water going from the street onto the property. You can see the difference between how dark it is here and how the white water settlement here is all whited out. And you can see how the water's been going down on the property the whole way. The person who actually has the choice to decide whether this is actual reimbursement or credit is the city engineer. And the person who that was Jim Hill at the time. He told me. He asked for me to give him all the documents because the city requested me to do this. And here you can see it's on there. This is done after the fact. What that is just theory. When someone does a report, they're just making an estimate of what they think is going to happen. This is actually what happens. And that's why when Jim Hill decided to give me credit and reimbursement for this, he knew because this was already been collecting water for 4 years when he made the analysis.
And more importantly, it was in the conditions as eligible and priority for that reason. There's a subject we haven't talked about, and it focuses on Mr. Alire, unfortunately. A loyal employee for a long time. In 2008, McBride's had to file for bankruptcy because their lender failed. The recession hit. The bankruptcy was a reorganization. And when they came out of it, there was a discharge order. And I'm going to read this to you. It's in your papers. It's important because it is the crux of the matter. That discharge order from the federal bankruptcy judge says, all creditors whose debts are discharged by this order and all creditors whose judgments are declared null and void by the order are enjoined from instituting or continuing any action or employing any process or engaging in any act to collect such debts Mr. McBride, will you tell us what happened in the meeting with Jim Hill and Mr. Alire when Mr. Alire found out that a calculation of $1.4 million in diff, calculated years after construction was completed, when Mr. Alire was informed that he couldn't collect that?
So here's what happened. After Mr. Hill had informed me that what was gonna be eligible for credit and reimbursement, and he actually handed me documents to prove this is what his findings were. We were invited down to the city hall to that little conference room there by the entrance doors, and we met with Mr. Alire, the city attorney, Mr. Fierro, Mr. Hill, and myself, my dad, and another attorney that I had at the time. And they thought we were gonna fight over this $1.4 million diff credit. But after explaining the bankruptcy to them, that they could no longer ask us to pay into that diff fund, Mr. Alire got very upset, jumped up, started screaming, and he said, if you don't accept these numbers right here, including the $1.4 million, why then I will make sure I will never take it to city council and you will never get paid. He says, if you want that money, you're gonna have to take me to court. And that's the day that we decided we had to take the city to court. We had to go get our money. Mr. Alire at the time was so upset because he realized he was the responsible party why the city couldn't collect 1.4 million. He forgot to put in a claim. And if he brought it to the city council, it would expose that he made a huge blunder, a huge mistake. I heard rumors that he was trying to get Mr. Ballantyne's job, that he wanted to be city manager. So he made every possible attempt to make sure that we couldn't get due process. But now I'm finally here and I get to tell my side of the story and I get to prove my documents. And I get to show that the real numbers that the city council should choose are the ones who did all the work. And that's Mr. Jim Hill. I'm accepting his numbers. He's the one that testified under an oath that said it was the numbers that Mr. McBride, that the city council was obligated to pay. You'll find that in your document too. He said that under oath. I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask Mr. Alire, but unfortunately I'm not allowed to ask. Could I ask one of the council members to ask 2 questions of Mr. Alire for me, please?
No.
Would anyone do it?
No, I don't think we can legally.
You cannot?
You can present the questions you have, and
Well, the
in the
city
rebuttal,
council
they
can
can
ask any
provide.
questions they would like, is that true?
That is correct. You can present the questions, and it's up to Mr. Gutierrez as to whether or not he'd like the
Can I have the questions, please?
question responded.
So here's my question. My question for Mr. Alire is, when you sat down, you and Mr. Hill sat down with the McBrides and presented this document, Exhibit 33, which you'll find in your package, which was used in the trial. That was what was given to me to determine what was to be paid to the McBrides. My question is, why was the storm drain eligible for credit at that time when you thought you could collect $1.4 million? Would you like him to answer?
I would just leave that up to Mr. Gutierrez to decide how to respond.
Okay.
Well, if you don't respond now, he's going to respond in front of the judge later. So you might as well just give his answer now if you'd like.
Well, go ahead and what's your other question?
My other question is, during the trial, while under oath, Mr. Alire was asked this question, and I'd like to know whether he would like to agree that he said this. The question was, and the only modification that has been done to the numbers on Exhibit 33, which I'm asking you guys to pay, is that the city has no longer claims of any development impact fees due to Phase 1, correct? And you know what his response was? Correct. He's saying, under oath, under penalty of perjury, that the numbers that Mr. Hill that gave to me were the correct numbers, except he could not charge me the $1.4 million diff fees. Now, some 8 years later, they want to change all that and come up with a completely new set of numbers, completely different calculations. The person who came up here is not even the city engineer. He can't make any determination. He can't weigh in on this. He's not the person that makes that decision. The only one eligible according to 3.45 of the code is Mr. Hill.
Okay. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Gutierrez back up to present his rebuttal and provide a closing argument. Limit 10 minutes.
Before I start my time, how much time do I have? 10 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. I can't produce evidence? Or I can?
Yes, this is a time when you can rebut the information provided.
All right, can somebody let me know when I'm done? Have 5 minutes left? Okay, thank you. So, I want to go, can you put the diagram back that Dave Gilbertson put up?
Use the microphone, Jimmy, if you're not going to stand in front of the lectern.
No, I'll stand. I'll stand here. Can somebody put the diagram that Mr. Gilbertson put up? Okay. I want to focus on parcel 1, the one that's yellow, green, and pink, which is in front of parcel 1 that was sold by the McBrides to Parkcrest, and then it became Chino Valley Center. First of all, this area has been calculated to provide reimbursement for the McBrides. It may be true that the McBrides did not get reimbursement from Parkcrest, but
Excuse me, say that again. Start in the beginning.
I said this area,
What colors?
yellow, green, and pink, that area, is part of the reimbursement that Mr. Gilbertson has calculated and that Jesus Placencia has authorized
Jimmy,
to be
that
awarded.
is not what was said before. The pink was not reimbursable.
But you're right, it
Said I
wasn't,
need-
it wasn't, but I'm talking about the area. I'm talking about this is a Parkcrest area.
But you
Let
just
me
said-
restate it then, I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say is that the area that's represented by the yellow, green, and pink is the area that was allegedly to be reimbursed by Parkcrest. That actually is not true because there was never any condition imposed on Parkcrest to do it. But the application for reimbursement includes it, and Mr. Gilbertson has calculated the amount that's available for reimbursement, but he deducted the pink portion. So all the smoke and allegation about them not having to get paid is not correct. They're being proposed to be paid for that. And there's also reference to promises that were made. Promises are not part of this proceeding. What's part of this proceeding is the order that the judge gave that we provide for reimbursement under Chapter 3.45. That's what we're doing. And that is predicated on the improvements that were required to be made by the conditions of approval for all the public improvements. And those conditions of approval included the street, and that's what's being done. I'm not going to say more on that. I want to focus on the storm drain issue now. Shouldn't be a storm drain. On the on-site retention basin, there is no condition that required the McBrides to install that on-site basin on this project. There were conditions that required them to make sure that water that was generated from their project stayed on the project. And after they submitted their hydrology report, it was determined that they had to install this on-site detention system to detain the water that was on that site, because downstream the city did not have any storm drain facilities, and the city did not want that area to be inundated by the water runoff on this project. That's why it was installed. Now, when they're asking for reimbursement, the reimbursement claim is only predicated on two things. One is the ordinance, and you've already heard testimony from Mr. Thorpe and Mr. Alire that this facility is not identified, and therefore it's not available for reimbursement. The second part is that there is that condition, the conditions of approval, 1.17 D, or I forgot exactly which one it is, that states that if off-site water, that is water from around the McBride project, goes onto the McBride project, then there can be reimbursement. But the hydrology report that was submitted by the McBride stated that no off-site water went on the site. It went east, and it was going to be collected by a detention basin to the east. And that, therefore, because there was no off-site water that went onto this, there was no available reimbursement. If there had been a determination that water off the site came onto the McBride property and was collected in that detention basin, then that would have been calculated, and there would have been a percentage of the cost possibly reimbursed back. But that process never occurred because there was never any evidence, and the McBrides have not offered any evidence as to the water coming on the site. So that's why it was rejected for reimbursement. And also, the other thing I would point out to you is that as far as the costs for the street that Mr. Gilbertson has testified, the McBrides have not offered any evidence that the costs were different than what Gilbert, am I done? It's 5 minutes. That they have not provided any evidence that the costs for the street improvements that they installed on Kimball Avenue were other than what Mr. Gilbertson testified. You also heard that Mr. Gilbertson reviewed all the cost documentation that had been submitted by the city by the McBrides. So I think that the request for reimbursement for the street improvement should be given back to the McBrides in a reimbursement agreement in the amount specified both by Mr. Gilbertson and Mr. Jesus Placencia's letter that came to the city. As far as any reimbursement for the on-site retention basis, there isn't any basis, and the city council cannot award it because the money does not exist. That money, if awarded, has to come out of the DIF fund for storm drain facilities, and no money was collected for this, so it's not available and it cannot be granted. Mr. Alire, would you come up here? I want to ask Mr. Alire a question. Mr. Alire, Mr. Fisher has submitted a document. I don't know what the exhibit is, but it's, I don't see a number on it in his, anyway, it's, there's a cover page that said City Engineer Hill's calculation of reimbursement done on time, March 24, 2011. And then there's another 2 pages with a document that reads Richard A. Harvey, and it says subject McBride's RV Storage. Do you see this document, Mr. Alire?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe that this document was a legitimate document of the city of Chino issued to Richard Harvey, who was a McBride's prior lawyer?
It's hard for me to tell. It doesn't appear to be because it's not on city letterhead. I don't see a signature on it from Mr. Hill. You know, it's, I don't know where this document came from because of those missing items.
There's not a date on it either, is there?
There's not a date either.
Now, there's an entry in here for, that says storm drain diff credit, $1,044,312. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you have an idea of what that might mean?
Diff credit? No, I don't.
Okay. If that was intended to mean or interpreted to mean that the McBrides were entitled to reimbursement for the on-site retention basin, would that have been a correct determination?
Well, based on what we know, that it's not in the DIF program and not in the master plan of facilities for DIF, it would be incorrect.
Now, this document later on under point 2 states that the city received $282,000 from Parkcrest. You see that?
I do.
In fact, did Parkcrest pay any money to the city of Chino?
Not to my knowledge.
Were you involved in the settlement agreement with Parkcrest that was approved by the council in August of 2010?
Yes.
And did that settlement agreement provide for payment to Parkcrest in that sum?
No.
I have no further questions. Well, I have how many minutes left? 1 minute? Okay. So, council, I apologize. This time limit is kind of crunching in on me. But basically what I want to say to you is that the sole basis of reimbursement pursuant to the order and the conditions of approval are under Chapter 3.45 and that other condition pertaining to possible reimbursement. That's why we're here. The evidence has been presented as to what's proper and what's not. It's clear that Jesus Placencia followed the correct protocol, made the correct determinations based on the evidence that you've heard here today, and I request that you affirm that decision, deny the McBride's request, and also authorize the preparation of a reimbursement agreement in that sum and have it submitted to the McBrides in compliance with your obligation under the appeal section of Chapter 3.45 of the Chino Municipal Code. Thank you very much.
Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Fisher back up to only address Mr. Gutierrez's rebuttal, and you're limited to 3 minutes.
Mr. McBride, did you hear what Mr. Alire just said about the document that contains Jim Hill's calculations?
Yes.
And his not being there and not recognizing it?
Yes, he lied because he said under oath in the courtroom and trial. I just read you some of the courtroom and trial. Now he's saying he'd never seen document 33 before, doesn't know anything about it. He's lying. It's just a blatant false lie. There's so much testimony. And if this city council chooses to accept their numbers and accept those lies, I have no choice but to go back to the judge. And I will have to show him this videotape of what he said right here. And we'll get to the bottom of this. But I just implore you to put an end to this nonsense. Pay me what I'm owed. I had the back of the city. I made the improvements. They're not arguing I didn't make the improvements. They said I made the improvements. Now they just don't want to pay up. Look, it's gone on for 8 years. I'm a citizen of Chino. I went to Don Lugo High School. I spent my entire life here. I'm one of you. So I don't understand why the city council would want to not take care of its own citizens. I had your back at the time when the city requested me to make all these improvements. All I'm asking you to do is just pay me back what's fair. That's it.
Okay, at this time, I would invite any member of the public that would like to make any comments on this item. Okay, seeing none, then we will close.
Perhaps before you close the public hearing, just a few comments. I know that there were statements made both by Mr. Fisher and in the documents that there were two sets of objections. First, to the protocol. It's true, Mr. Fisher did object to the initial protocol that I distributed to both Mr. Fisher and Mr. Gutierrez. Mr. Fisher argued that he should be allowed to speak first and last, and even though there was no legal authority for this type of an administrative appeal to support that position, I nevertheless, as is recommended and was adopted by this council, provided that opportunity for the appellant to both speak first and last. So I accommodated that request. There was also the objection about a staff report providing a recommendation, which for any appeal, as this council is familiar with, of whether it's an entitlement or other procedural requirement, typically has a staff recommendation along with the report. There was also, as I read through the documents that I received today, there's an objection that documents were missing from the set of documents that Mr. Fisher provided to my office, requesting that they be included in this. I had provided the entire set that Mr. Fisher faxed to my office. I know his internet wasn't working, so I offered the opportunity to have him fax them to me. I also notified both Mr. Gutierrez and Mr. Fisher of the availability of the staff report on Friday afternoon. By email, I informed both of them. I did not hear a word about any missing documents until just now when I read these materials. And finally, I'd just like to state that before the hearing started, I did announce the timing for each party to present the evidence and at each step. And I did say asked if there was any feedback. I did not hear anything until after the conclusion of the appellant's testimony. So I just wanted to explain some procedural responses to some of the procedural objections that I heard today. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing now and ask for any comments from council members. Mr. Howley.
Yes, I thought we were just going to have a quick little reimbursement. I didn't realize we were going to get the whole story here. I do want to look this thing over. I will look this thing over. I mean, I've been on the council for 17 years, and I know when McBride's built the facility, and I know about the AM/PM market. I know about the whole thing. It's been a very long process, and it shouldn't go on this long. I agree. This should have been taken care of a long time ago. I will look this over, and again, I mean, I know the city side. I don't know your whole side, the McBride side, so I will read this. But there's always two sides to every story. I mean, I understand that part, and I'll look it over. But I think I've seen the city with so many projects. We've done so many things. I'm kind of shocked by some of the allegations. I know Mr. Alire very personally. I find that hard to believe, his actions in a meeting like that. But anyway, I'll look this over, and that's pretty much what I have to say.
If I may interrupt, I know there's the comment by the Mayor Pro Tem about wanting to look things over. Just procedurally, you have some options, Council. You could.
I understand.
You can make the decision this evening. You can also ask to continue this matter to your next meeting. The public hearing's closed, so testimony has ended unless this council wants to maintain that public hearing open and leave the opportunity for further testimony. But certainly you can continue this so you can deliberate on the issues and go through the documents.
Well, I think we only have one thing for certain, is the reimbursement for the diff that the city says.
Correct.
With all the other stuff going on, I mean, I'm willing to take a look at that, but that's more of a comment.
Right.
But I didn't say I wanted to continue this.
Okay. I just wanted to provide those options to the council,
Right.
that you could certainly come back, even though the public hearing and testimony is over, you can come back and render a decision in the future, or you can decide tonight.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes. I'd like to have more time to review the report.
Back up. You're too loud. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, close. You're too close.
Have my principal voice on. I'd like more time to review the report. So.
Mr. George?
So when you say the public hearing's over, we can't ask questions?
We can reopen the public hearing if we choose, but not, I don't believe tonight we can open it back up again.
Tonight, well, it's up to
Or
you,
can
this
we?
council. Yes, you can reopen it and ask specific questions if you have some questions in mind.
Well, Tom, or Gary, let me make some comments. I have read much of this documentation, and not all of it, of course. That faxed copy is almost impossible to read. So I'm in favor of delaying any decision tonight, and I would like Mr. Fisher to provide us with better copies, because this is, I mean, it's impossible to read. The fax copy was so poor.
I did make a comment about that and offered that the documents could be either resent or somehow sent in a different form,
Yeah.
because the copies I received were of this quality.
No, I understand, but they're just hard to read. And based on the information that we found tonight, I want to go back and look at some of this information, because there's a lot of documentation and it is hard to read, and I want to go back and look at those sections that were quoted. I want to look at that trial testimony. I am not comfortable with making any decision this evening. And there may be more questions. There may be after we have an opportunity to go over the information that was provided tonight and get copies that we can actually read. So what I'm going to do after other comment from council is I'm going to request that we delay any action on this and bring it back.
So the options are either maintain the public hearing closed or reopen the public hearing and continue it to a date certain, so then you have an opportunity to ask questions.
Okay, I would
because
like to do that.
Okay.
I would like to do that. because we may have further questions that we don't have tonight based on the testimony. Are there any objections to that?
No.
Any objections?
No.
Any objections? Okay. Then, can you put that in form of a motion?
Yes, and your city manager raised a very wise point. Your next hearing, your next city council meeting, you have the same composition of council members, but soon after that, I think the following meeting, you won't. So in lieu of redoing the entire hearing before 2 new members, that next meeting would probably be the opportunity.
Okay.
And so the suggested motion is a motion to reopen the public hearing and continue the matter to your next regular meeting, which is on December 5th.
Okay, I would make that motion.
Yes. Second.
And Mayor Pro Tem Howie seconds it. Angela, can you put that on the electronic voting? Okay. Okay, please vote. And that item passes 4 yes with 1 absent. So this item will be taken back up on December 5th. Okay. Next item on the agenda is mayor and council reports. I just want to thank everybody for coming this evening and sitting through this. I know it's a lot of information, but the decisions that we make are very important. They're very important for our community, and I think it's frustrating to take so much time in resolving things, but I think it's very important that we do it in the right way. And I'm not going to report on anything that I attended during this last period. It's been a long night. I'm not. No, I choose not to. Mayor Pro Tem Howie.
Just a couple of quick things. I attended Water Facilities Authority Metro Valley study session for SBCTA, Water Master, and the CDA Finance meeting all in one day last Thursday. I was pretty well citied out that day. So we just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and a great holiday. That's it.
Okay, Councilman George.
No report. Everybody have a great holiday.
Councilman Rodriguez.
I attended the National League of Cities
Back up.
in Los Angeles, November 7th through the 10th. That's the end of my report. Happy Thanksgiving.
City Manager's report, Mr. Valentine.
Again, just as a reminder, our next meeting is December 5th, which is actually a Wednesday, not a Tuesday when we regularly meet. So the council has a conflict on December 4th. Therefore, we're meeting again on December 5th.
And it will be the Christmas tree lighting ceremony
That's
as
correct.
well. Mr. Galante, any city attorney's report?
No report tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Chief Comstock. Whoops, no report. And who's for fellow? Chief Shackelford, no report from the fire department. With that, we are adjourned to our next regular meeting, which again will be held on Wednesday, December 5th at 7. Please join us. No, it's 7. Please join us for the Christmas tree lighting ceremony at 6. We are adjourned.
Thank you.